Rescuers work through the night in Syria and Turkey to recover people trapped under rubble as 2 earthquakes kill thousands.
Antonio Guterres said there is no hint of Russia and Ukraine heading to the negotiating table, and the world could be sleepwalking into a wider war.
For this young woman, the ordeal is finally over. Trapped for hours under the rubble in the Turkish city of Diyarbakir, she was one of the lucky ones. Thousands have died in a series of massive earthquakes that hit Turkey and Syria on Monday. Rescuers continue to work through the freezing conditions, but it's likely the death toll will continue to rise. The first 7.8 magnitude earthquake hit southeast Turkey at around 4:30 on Monday morning. It was followed by a second quake of 7.5 magnitude some hours later to the north of the original one. Faced with overwhelming numbers of victims, some of the injured are being flown to Istanbul, with firefighters, medics and some 3,500 soldiers hurriedly being mobilized. Meanwhile, in war-torn northern Syria, tens of thousands have been left homeless. For a region that is host to millions of refugees, where warring factions still prevail, this quake seems like an especially cruel fate. But despite the rampant suffering, there are shards of hope. Every person pulled out from the rubble gives rescuers and locals belief that more can be saved from this tragic event. More than 45 countries are responding to an urgent call for aid from Turkey. Dozens of nations and organizations have offered to assist rescue efforts in Turkey's southeast and Syria's northwest after Monday's earthquake disaster, which has killed thousands of people. Spain is flying equipment and specialist teams to help find survivors, one of countless EU countries who are sending their support to Turkey. Meanwhile, in Syria, Russian soldiers stationed there are helping to clear debris. Moscow is also sending 4 plane loads of rescuers and equipment to Turkey. The US has said it is committed to helping residents on both sides of the Turkey-Syria border devastated by the quakes, but Washington has ruled out dealing directly with the Syrian government. Greece, which often has difficult relations with Turkey, has sent a large team of 21 rescuers, 2 rescue dogs, a special rescue vehicle, a structural engineer, 5 doctors and seismic planning experts. Israel too is sending aid to Turkey, but relations with Syria are more hostile. However, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said he has also approved a request for humanitarian aid for the country, received through a diplomatic official. Meanwhile, the frantic search for survivors goes on.
Similar scenes north in Diyarbakir, southeast Turkey, where rescue teams are battling to save the living.
Şu an benim 2 tane yeğenim, bir tane de dayımın oğlu orada. Yani şu an can çekişiyor, yani toprağın altında. Şu anki sistemden dolayı yani yetişemiyoruz.
These apartment buildings were turned to mounds of rubble. Locals are scrambling through the debris, trying to find the bodies of their loved ones.
Yeğenim burada oturuyor, onların binasının yıkıldığını öğrenince buraya geldik, 5'ten beri buradayız, onlar enkaz altındalar. Umutla bekliyoruz çıkarılmalarını. Şu anda çalışma durdu, yeni bir deprem bekleniyormuş herhalde.
Hundreds of soldiers, police and firefighters have been working around the clock since the early hours of Monday morning. The quake measured a magnitude of 7.8. Several residential blocks collapsed and another multi-storey building toppled, with the aftershocks that followed.
According to the Ukrainian army, its forces have repelled attacks on 14 settlements around Bakhmut over the past 24 hours. The destruction in a village located north of the fiercely embattled city is vast. With no hint of the war moving towards the negotiating table, the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has issued a stark warning.
The Russian invasion of Ukraine is inflicting untold suffering on the Ukrainian people with profound global implications. The prospects for peace keep diminishing. The chances of further escalation and bloodshed keep growing. I fear the world is not sleepwalking into a wider war. I fear it's doing so with its eyes wide open.
And as if to illustrate the concerns by Ukraine's neighbors, Patriot missile batteries that Poland acquired from the US last year have been deployed in the country's capital, Warsaw, as part of military exercises. Poland is taking additional steps to strengthen its defense capabilities as Russia's war in neighboring Ukraine enters its second year. And the consequences of the war are all too real. The funeral of a soldier who died fighting on the front lines in eastern Ukraine was held in Kiev on Monday. He was killed in a fierce artillery battle in Bakhmut against Russian troops last month.
Russian forces continue to bombard Ukrainian positions at several locations in Donetsk as they seek to gain ground along the front line. Ukraine says its units are repelling the attacks, but are preparing for further escalation. As our correspondent in Kyiv, Sasha Vakulina, reports.
Ukraine is bracing for a possible Russian offensive right for the first anniversary of the full-scale invasion. The country's president, Volodymyr Zelensky, said there are already many reports that the occupiers want to do something symbolic in February to try to avenge their last year's defeats. Now, these warnings, they do seem somehow similar to January 2022, when Western allies were warning Ukraine that the invasion was imminent, but this is not 2022, and the feeling here in Kyiv is very different, both among the population and among the authorities. Ukraine's defense ministry admits that not all Western weaponry will have arrived by that time, but the authorities are convinced that Ukraine has enough reserves to hold off Russian forces. Sasha Vakulina from Kyiv for Euronews.
The EU is stepping up the economic fight against Russia after introducing a set of measures which hit its oil exports. The ban on importing Russian refined oil products came into force on Sunday, including EU purchases of diesel and jet fuel.
The EU, until February 5th, imported about 70 million euros per day of worth of oil products, especially diesel, from Russia. The EU has been by far the largest buyer of oil products from Russia. So this is highly impactful.
In the short term, experts are not worried about diesel shortages as companies piled up stocks before the Sunday deadline. The long-term outlook, though, remains to be seen. The EU and G7 countries have also expanded their existing price cap on Russian crude oil to include all refined products. This means EU-based companies cannot provide services to Russian tankers that sell premium products like kerosene and petrol at a price above $100 per barrel. For so-called discount products like fuel oil and naphtha, a maximum of $45 per barrel has been set.
The price cap on oil products are set at a high level that still enables Russia to profit from this trade. So European-owned, European-insured tankers continue to carry Russian crude oil, Russian oil products to third countries, and the price cap for this trade, or the price caps for this trade, need to be substantially revised down.
But experts warn Russia can circumvent the latest EU sanctions if the loopholes are not closed.
This is going to be a game of cat and mouse that will continue for probably as long as Russia continues its war of aggression against Ukraine. For example, Russia is now exporting crude oil to countries such as Turkey, United Arab Emirates, India, and then the refined oil products out of that crude oil. Some of them are imported back into the EU.
The EU is also working on a 10th set of sanctions against Moscow, which is expected to be introduced by the first anniversary of Russia's invasion of Ukraine on February the 24th.
The head of the Russian Orthodox Church has more in common with President Vladimir Putin than just his fervour for invading Ukraine. According to reports broken by the Swiss press, Patriarch Kirill worked for the Soviet intelligence, the KGB, in the 1970s. While living in Geneva, Monsignor Kirill operated under the name Mikhailov and was on a mission to influence the World Council of Churches, the WCC. The Russian Orthodox Church has yet to comment on Kirill's alleged espionage activities, while the WCC says it has no information on the matter.
During these dark, cold days in Copenhagen, nothing better than some bright, beautiful lights. The Copenhagen Light Festival brings a total of 67 artistic installations by artists from around the world, from sculpture to projection mapping, to all the main districts of the Danish capital.
The Light Festival is for all the people. You are rich, you are poor, you are young, you are old. You can go and see and look and appreciate everything. And I think it's a good way to see art.
In the middle of these dark months, having a festival that celebrates city life and being together and having extraordinary artistic experiences is so important for a city like Copenhagen.
The Copenhagen Light Festival opened at the weekend and lasts for 3 weeks until February the 26th. 13 of the 67 installations will stay in place after the festival has finished.